The war with the Zulu nation was intended to be completed within a few weeks, but despite their few successes, the British were right back where they had started from in the beginning of January. The British government took decisive action and sent Sir Garnet Wolseley to replace Chelmsford, but Chelmsford moved to inflict a decisive defeat on Cetshwayo's forces before Wolseley arrived. With the arrival of fresh reinforcements, Chelmsford reorganised his forces, which now totalled 16,000 British and 7,000 native troops. He led his army into Zululand in June, this time with extreme caution, building fortified camps all along the way to prevent any repeat of Isandlwana. On the morning of the 1st of June 1879, a reconnoitring party under the command of Lieutenant Carney was sent out. In this party was a French exile, the Prince Imperial, Louis Napoleon. At noon, the Prince halted the party at a deserted corral. The Prince and Carey made some sketches of the terrain and used part of the thatch to make a fire. As they were preparing to leave, about 40 Zulus fired upon them and rushed towards them. The Prince ran to mount his horse and was able to grab onto the holster on his saddle. The Prince's horse then dashed off before he could mount. After about 100 yards, the strap the Prince was clinging to broke and the horse kicked the Prince in the belly, winding him. The Prince fell beneath his horse and his right arm was trampled. He leapt up, drawing his revolver with his left hand, and started to run, but the Zulus outpaced him. The Prince desperately fired his revolver, but he missed each shot. One of the Zulus threw his spear at the Prince, striking him in the left shoulder. The Prince tried to fight on, but weakened by his wounds, he sank to the ground and was overwhelmed. When the Prince's corpse was recovered the next day, it was found naked, and an autopsy counted 18 wounds, all of which were stab wounds. The Zulu king Cetshwayo still hoped to end hostilities by negotiation and refrain from attacking the extended and vulnerable supply lines. Consequently, the British advance was thus unopposed. As the force advanced, Cetshwayo dispatched envoys from Ulundi to the British. These envoys reached Chelmsford on the 4th of June, with the message that Cetshwayo wished to know what terms would be acceptable to cease hostilities. Chelmsford sent a Zulu-speaking Dutch trader back with their terms in writing, which were rejected. During the advance, British troops were on edge for fear of a sudden attack by the Zulus. On the evening of the 6th of June, jittery British troops and artillery in lager at Fort Newdigate opened fire on an arriving picket company of Royal Engineers commanded by Lieutenant John Chard of Rorke's Drift fame, killing 2 horses and wounding 1. By the 16th, the slow advance was quickened by the news that Wolseley was on his way to Natal to take command. On the 28th of June, Chelmsford column was a mere 17 miles away from Ulundi. When Sir Garnet Wolseley arrived in Cape Town, he cabled Chelmsford ordering him not to undertake any serious actions. Chelmsford had no intention of letting Wolseley stop him from making a last effort to restore his reputation, and did not reply. Wolseley sent a second message on the 30th of June, reading, "Concentrate your force immediately and keep it concentrated. Undertake no serious operation without detached bodies of troops. Acknowledge receipt of this message at once and flash back your latest moves. I am astonished at not hearing from you." On the same day the cable was received, Cetshwayo's representatives appeared again. These envoys bore some of what the British commander had demanded: oxen, a promise of guns, and a gift of elephant tusks. The peace was again rejected as the terms had not been fully met, and Chelmsford turned the envoys away without accepting the elephant tusks, and informed them that the advance would only be delayed one day to allow the Zulus to surrender one regiment of their army. The British were now visible from the Royal Corral, and a dismayed Cetshwayo was desperate to end the hostilities. With the invading enemy in sight, he knew no Zulu regiment would surrender, so Cetshwayo sent a further 100 white oxen from his own herd, along with Prince Napoleon's sword, which the Zulus had taken in the skirmish on the 1st of June. The British, having learned a bitter lesson at Isandlwana, would take no chances meeting the Zulu army in the open with their normal line of battle, such as the thin red line like that at Balaclava. Their advance would begin at first light, prior to forming his infantry into a large hollow square, with mounted troops covering the sides and rear. Neither wagon lagers nor trenches would be used, to convince both the Zulus and critics that a British square could beat them fairly in the open. On the 4th of July 1879, the two forces met at Ulundi. The Zulus charged the British square in waves of attack in hope of getting within close range, but they could not prevail against the British fire. There were several casualties within the square to Zulu marksmen, but the British firing did not waver, and no warrior was able to get within 30 yards of the British ranks. The Zulu threw in their reserve force, which charged against the southwest corner of the square. 9-pounder cannons tore great chunks out of this body, while the infantry opened fire. The speed of the charge made it seem as if the Zulu would get close enough to engage in hand-to-hand combat, but no warrior reached the British ranks. Chelmsford ordered the cavalry to mount, and the 17th Lancers charged the now fleeing Zulus. The Zulus fled towards the high ground with cavalry at their heels and shells falling ahead of them. The Lancers were checked at the Miblane stream by the fire of a concentrated party of Zulus, causing several casualties to the cavalrymen before they overcame the resistance. The pursuit continued until not a Zulu remained on the plain, with members of the Natal Native Horse, Natal Native Contingent and Woods Irregulars killing the Zulu wounded in revenge for similar Zulu actions at Isandlwana. After half an hour of concentrated fire from the artillery, the Gatling guns and thousands of British riflemen, the Zulu military power was broken. British casualties were 10 killed and 87 wounded, while nearly 500 Zulus dead were counted around the square, with another 1,000 or more wounded. Chelmsford ordered the Royal Corral of Ulundi to be burnt. A victorious Chelmsford turned over command to Wolseley on the 15th of July at Fort St Paul's, leaving for home on the 17th. Chelmsford had partially salvaged his reputation and received a Knight Grand Cross of Bath, largely because of Ulundi. However, he was severely criticised by the Horse Guards investigation, and he would never serve in the field again. After the Battle of Ulundi, the Zulu army dispersed. Most of their leading chiefs submitted to the British, and Cetshwayo became a fugitive. Wolseley, having relieved Chelmsford after Ulundi, took over the final operations. On the 28th of August, the king was captured and exiled, first to Cape Town and then to London. Cetshwayo returned to Zululand in 1883, and the British government tried to restore him to rule, at least part of his previous territory, but the attempt failed. With the aid of Boer mercenaries, Chief Zibihu started a war contesting the succession, and on the 22nd of July 1883, he attacked Cetshwayo's new corral at Ulundi. Cetshwayo was wounded, but escaped to the forests of Nkandla. After pleas from the resident commissioner, Sir Melmoth Osborne, Cetshwayo moved to Esho, where he died a few months later on the 8th of February 1884, presumably from a heart attack, although there are some theories that he may have been poisoned. His body was buried in a field within sight of the forest, to the south near Nkunzane River. Because of the unusually high number of casualties the British suffered as a result of combat, especially given that they were facing an inferior enemy, the British war effort was widely seen as a poor showing. British casualties resulting from combat were 3 times higher than those of disease, which was generally a larger killer in the British colonial conflicts. The dynasty of Shaka Zulu was disposed, and the Anglo Zulu War would pass into the pages of history.